Hey, gang, what's in my hand right now? You say, oh, Michael, that's your iPhone. Well, it is, but it's also a means of playing blackjack. How about a little blackjack or Texas Hold'em right on your phone? Action and excitement from wherever you are in the state of Michigan. The Play Gun Lake Casino and Sportsbook app right on your phone. Have some fun. Daily promotions, live dealers, and a lot more. Hundreds of hot slots and table games. All your favorite classic casino games right on your fingertips. It's so easy to do. Doctor's office, airport lounge, who knows where you are, but if you're in Michigan, you can have some fun. Odds and slots and bets and games. And by the way, a great deal for new users. Download the Play Gun Lake Casino app right now and get up to $1,000 casino bonus back if you're down in the first 24 hours. That's for new users only. The bonus has to be wagered. Terms and conditions apply. See the website at playgunlake.com for details. Got to be 21 and in Michigan. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER or Michigan Problem Gambling Helpline 1-800-270-7117. Time now for Monday headlines from the Smerconish.com daily newsletter. Actually, I want to backtrack because there are some great headlines from the weekend that I haven't had an opportunity yet to address, and I want to do that as well. Let me begin with today's poll question. Would a criminal conviction end Donald Trump's chances of being elected president? We've discussed this in the past, but we haven't made it a poll question. Today had to be the day, though, because in the South Carolina primary over the weekend on Saturday, Trump beats Nikki Haley by 20 or so points. And yet again, we see in the polling data, and this is according to Edison Research, always like to tell you where I'm getting my information. 1/3 of South Carolina GOP primary voters say that a conviction would make Donald Trump unfit for office. And the question is, do they really mean it? There was an essay that I made reference to on the program last week. I talked about it on CNN on Saturday as well. It was from slate.com. Ben Mathis Lilly wrote it. And he went through all the data like this, like the data from Edison that says that 32% is the actual number. 32% of South Carolina GOP primary voters thought Trump would be unfit if convicted. And in Ben's essay, he says, there have been any number of polls where people have said, well, I'm for Trump, but if Trump's convicted, then I can't be for Donald Trump. And he says, do they really mean it? Because so many things have transpired, so many things have taken place that you would expect to cause people to say, he really did shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue this time. And yet nothing, grab him by the P, fill in the blank, nothing has caused the base to turn away from him. So why do we all of a sudden believe his voters when they say, well, no, if he's convicted, like this time I would really mean it? I don't know. It's a hell of a question. So that's why I'm asking it today. Do you really think a conviction? He is scheduled for trial in a month, in 1 month, in the Alvin Bragg Stormy Daniels case. If he's convicted in that case, do you really think that a quarter or a third of his voters in the hush money payoff case are going to say, well, I was for Trump, but I can't be for Trump any longer? I don't see it. Saturday, we had huge voting. CNN program drove a lot of people to Smerconish.com to vote on this. It was kind of a puzzle. You had to think about it. I came up with it on Friday night, and I thought, this is a great poll question. I hope people will get it, and I hope they'll have fun with it. I think they did, because 44,014 cast ballots on the poll question. Which is more accurate? Only Biden can beat Trump, meaning only Joe Biden. Nobody else is going to beat Donald Trump. Only Joe Biden can beat Donald Trump. Or is it more accurate to say Trump can only beat Biden? Meaning, if it weren't Joe Biden, if it were any other Democrat, then Donald Trump could never be running ahead of that individual, whomever she or he might be, the way that Trump is right now ahead of Joe Biden in battleground states, as well as in the national polls. So that's what I was getting at with the poll question. And I think people had fun with it. Some people said, oh, we needed a third choice. There should have been a selection there that said neither. So Which is more accurate? Only Biden can beat Trump. Nobody else can. Only Joe can do it. Or Trump can only beat Biden. 54.63% said only Biden can beat Donald Trump. 45.37% said Trump can only beat Biden. From the Saturday newsletter over the weekend, Gallup on Friday came out with a new poll. It showed that the president's approval rating is at 38%. Dateline, Washington, D.C., Americans' approval of President Biden's job performance has edged down 3 percentage points to 38%, just 1 point shy of the all-time low and well below the 50% threshold that has typically led to re-election for incumbents. I mean, that's the important part, gang. You know, typically when you're going into an election, and we don't live in typical times, I get it. But typically when you're going into an election, it's like, well, are they at 50%? He's not only not at 50%, he's not at 40%. He's not at 40%, which takes me to another of the headlines from the weekend. Saturday, Bob Costas was my guest on CNN, and Sunday we covered in the newsletter the fact that Bob Costas came on. It's very important to understand the context. Bob Costas came on and said that he is, these are not the words that he used, but he's a never Trumper. That he's a never Trumper in the same way that Nate Silver is a never Trumper. He's a never Trumper in the same way that Ezra Klein is a never Trumper. You've got all of these individuals who are sort of part of the intelligentsia, many affiliated with the Democratic Party. I'm not saying that any of these three are necessarily, but their job is not to carry water for the D's or the R's for that matter. And they are all of the opinion, including Bob Costas, that Joe Biden has to step aside because Biden right now is in a perilous position and Donald Trump poses such an existential threat to democracy and the best interest of the nation. They argue that the word that Costas used was hubris, that the hubris, the overconfidence of Biden is not in the country's best interest. Frankly, he didn't use the word selfish, but that's really what he was saying. And so Costas is now a part of the group that says, for the good of the nation, Biden needs to step aside. And it's not because, it's not because he doesn't want the Democrats to succeed, but rather to the contrary, he thinks Donald Trump is so perilous to the nation. I went through, as I did the setup for the Costas interview, I went through everything that Silver had written. Remember, Nate Silver said that he used to think a year ago that Joe Biden was like a 2/3 likely to be reelected. And then, as he put it in his essay, he passed the Rubicon in November and said, you know what, this guy has got to stand down. And Ezra Klein, in his podcast, he's the New York Times columnist, is of the same opinion. And they think that to go back to the poll question, they think that Biden is the one guy that Trump can beat, that Trump couldn't beat anybody else. So Bob Costas came on. He made his pitch as to why he's a never Trumper. Found it interesting that I saw yesterday on Fox, they were using that part of the tape, and then said that he thinks that that Joe Biden has got to step aside. A lot of people now, I think, warming to the idea that it is possible. This is the way that we used to nominate individuals. This is the way that conventions used to select who would be the Republican and Democratic candidate. So it can be done. It would add a lot of excitement. And I am increasingly of the opinion that it's going to happen. I'm not here to make a prediction, but I am increasingly of the opinion that there really could be a change. And who the hell knows what happens with regard to Trump, which goes to today's poll question. If he were to be convicted, would people really who are now with him abandon him? Who knows? Who knows? All I know for sure is that it's the 26th of February, and there is a lot of action still to unfold relative to this election and things that we could never, ever imagine. More headlines now from the Monday edition of the Smerconish.com daily newsletter. Actually, this goes to one of the weekend stories that we had, Fani Willis and Nathan Wade. My takeaway is that, this could be one of those cover-up being worse than the underlying crime stories. From ABC, former President Donald Trump on Friday submitted a request to enter new evidence in his Georgia election interference case based off Fulton County prosecutor Nathan Wade's cell phone records, which the filing claims show that Wade visited the area of the home of Fulton County DA Fani Willis approximately 35 times during an 11-month period in 2021. And if you're hearing that and you're saying, well, who the hell cares? And what exactly is the relevance of it? The relevance of it is that this all goes to the timeline. He maintains, both of them maintain that they weren't having a relationship at a time when the phone records surely suggest they were. And, shame on them that they didn't stop and think that they were going to get caught in the web of the triangulation of the cell phone records that can put you in a particular location. And that's what's taking place in this case. So I don't know what Judge McAfee is going to do. I don't know if he's going to say that Fani Willis can't run the prosecution. I don't know if he's going to say that Nathan Wade can't be the prosecutor. Trump's filing on Friday was based on an affidavit from a criminal investigator who said that he conducted an analysis of Wade's subpoenaed AT&T phone records spanning from January through November of 2021. His name is Charles Mittelstadt. He claimed that he analyzed all interactions between Wade and Willis during this time, which he initially said revealed over 2,000 calls and nearly 12,000 texts during an 11-month period, most of which would likely have been before Wade was hired. Okay, so put it all together, and what does it mean? It means that they were having a relationship, or these records would suggest that they were having a relationship, and she then still hired him. Bad lapse of judgment. I'm not here to convince you that Fani Wade is lining her pocket because she hired Nathan. That Fani Willis, pardon me, is lining her pocket because she hired Nathan Wade, and they had it in cahoots that they were going to, indict Donald Trump and all these other people just to make money. In fact, I'm not of that opinion. I don't think that either of them is that stupid. But I do believe they exercised poor judgment in her appointing him taking the job after they were already having a relationship. Surely they knew. And by the way, you've heard me say this already. Margaret Carlson, writing that great piece in the Washingtonian, makes the argument that her only crime was being human. So read that essay because I found it to be enlightening. Back to Trump, by the way, as long as I'm thinking of all the legal trials and tribulations of Donald Trump, he is on the hook right now in round numbers for approaching $500 million. $500 million, and the meter is running, the clock is ticking. Use whatever analogy you want. From the Associated Press, and we had this story over the weekend at Smerconish.com as well. The staggering civil fraud judgment against Donald Trump was finalized in New York on Friday, making official a verdict that leaves the former president on the hook for more than $454 million in fines and interest. The procedural step by the New York County clerk starts the clock on Trump's appeals process, while allowing the debt to begin racking up post-judgment interest of nearly $112,000 each and every day. In his February 16 ruling, Judge Arthur Encore ruled that Trump lied for years about his wealth in order to secure favorable loans and make deals that help prop up his real estate empire. He was ordered to pay $354.9 million in penalties plus nearly $100 million in interest. And what does Trump say? Where are the victims? Where are the victims? Who are the people who were victimized by what the prosecutor claims were my fraudulent acts? And to that end, on CNN this weekend, I had a guy named Joe Lonsdale, businessman, successful guy. He wrote an essay co-authored with former Florida Governor Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush, no fan of Donald Trump. In fact, my question to Joe Lonsdale was initially, why in the world would Jeb Bush have wanted to author this piece, which comes to the defense of Donald Trump? Lonsdale and Jeb argue there weren't victims and that the fine, $355 million verdict, was excessive. I happen to agree that it was excessive. You heard me say last week, and a lot of you didn't like me saying that it would have had more credibility if it were $11.275 million. But $350 million when you don't have someone a la Bernie Madoff standing there having been defrauded out of their life savings, Now, of course, there are arguments against that position and against the Lonsdale position, namely that inflating Donald Trump's net worth or inflating the value of the properties in which he was invested, which indirectly then inflated his net worth, lessened his interest rate. You know, it allowed Trump to come in through the back door, not the front door, in negotiating with the banks. And consequently, even if he paid back the banks, he took advantage of them. Therein was the fraud. The second, if you read Judge Nguyen's opinion, as I've done, the second argument is one that says fraud hurts us all because deceit needs to be priced into future deals. If there are guys like Trump who are out there who are conducting themselves in a fraudulent manner, it hurts the entire industry. So I enjoyed having him as a guest. I thought it was a really great conversation. Yesterday, we had a lopsided poll result, by the way, on whether Trump was correct. This is another story that we covered over the weekend in explaining his black support. CNN.com had this coverage. Everybody had this coverage, but I went with theirs. Former President Trump suggested Friday that his criminal indictments and mugshot appeal to black voters claimed that it's what's happening to him happens to them. Quote, I got indicted for nothing, for something that is nothing. They were doing it because it's election interference. Then I got indicted a second time and a third time and a fourth. And a lot of people said that's why the black people like me, because they have been hurt so badly and discriminated against. And they actually viewed me as I'm being discriminated against. So I asked yesterday, is there any truth to Trump believing that blacks look at him and say, gosh, this guy is actually one of us? 90 or so percent said, no, that's ridiculous. Okay, from today's newsletter, what kids lose without snow days. It's like every day, you know, I'm so gearing up now for the Mingle Project, which is my effort to try and enlighten people about the age of our disconnect from one another amidst all this political polarization. More to come. Looking forward to seeing many of you in Sellersville, Pennsylvania on April 7. Looking forward to seeing many of you in Northern California on Wednesday night in Walnut Creek. That's going to be a lot of fun at the Lesher Speaker Series. So I'll be speaking all about the Mingle Project Wednesday night in California, April 7 in Sellersville, Pennsylvania. And every day I see stories that kind of fit what I'm describing. And today's story is a great piece. Michael Vunutolo Mentavani. Michael, I hope I did right by your name. What kids lose without snow days. I love the way it began, and I'll bet this will be mindful of many of your school days. We had many superstitions, he writes, when I was a kid. Wear your pajamas inside out, or wear your underwear on the outside of your PJs. Gargle a bit of salt water right before bed. When you put your shoes away, make sure they're backward. Left shoe on the right-hand side, right on the left. Our teachers would remind us of these tricks during the day before a potential snowfall. That night, we would all do our part, hoping and praying that we'd awaken to a sheet of fresh snow deep enough to render our schools closed for the day. On those mornings, we'd wake up earlier than usual to stare at the local news channel, filled with anticipation as the names of the local school districts drifted across the screen, anxious to see our own listed among the lucky ones. In my case, in the Philly burbs and in the city of Philadelphia, you'd listen to KYW News Radio for your number, because every school district had a number, and you hope that they would call out number 712, like, hey, that's our school district. We don't have school. You're saying to yourself right now, okay, what's it got to do with the Mingle Project, Michael? What's this got to do with socialization? Melanie Killen is a professor of human development and qualitative methodology at the University of Maryland. And she was quoted in this story saying, snow days need to be sledding days. Snow days offer a different kind of learning, an important kind of learning. She said, I wouldn't necessarily call it a brain break. Kids are out there. They're using their brains in different ways on snow days. It's a break from the traditional teacher-children dissemination, which kids need. She then described how throwing snowballs was like a lesson in physics, how sledding involved implicit mathematics, and how even the very snow itself provided children with a sense of material understanding, But this was the part of the story that I then circled. These more free-form social settings also allow children to learn how to interact with people in the world, how to infer intentions and expectations, and how to learn about fairness, morality, and justice. This is known as social cognition, which, according to the American Psychological Association, is the way that people perceive, think about, interpret, categorize, and judge their own social behaviors and those of others. I thought it was a great point, really great point. Kids get to mingle on snow days. They get to mingle on snow days and in a way that is different from what they're doing every other day in the classroom. Don't miss another story under the headline, "No, the EV market is not collapsing." I was attuned to this because as a driver of an electric vehicle that I love driving, I think that there's this perception out there now that the EV industry is on its back. And the data that was in the CNN story says that's absolutely not the case, that they haven't met their projections. However, EV sales were up 40% from the same quarter a year before in the last quarter of 2023. So it's all headed in an upward trajectory, but perhaps not at the level that people had anticipated. Okay? Thank you, gang. Make sure you're voting on today's poll question at Smerconish.com. I want to know if Trump is convicted. If he's convicted, really are a quarter of the people of the MAGA base going to turn away from him? That's what I'm getting at with the poll question. Make sure you're a newsletter subscriber. Hit all the social media. Mostly thank you for listening and see you tomorrow.